From trailblazer to lightning rod. Tiffany Henyard's fall and Dalton's reckoning. Tiffany Henyard's journey, from celebrated icon to controversial figure, has plunged Dalton into a full-blown political crisis. Once hailed as a historic leader, Henyard shattered glass ceilings by becoming the first woman, and a young, ambitious black woman at that, to serve as mayor of Dalton, Illinois. Her election was seen as a turning point, a break from a stagnant political past, and a beacon of hope for a community long plagued by neglect, mismanagement, and inertia for many. Henyard's rise represented more than just personal achievement. It symbolized a broader movement toward inclusion, progress, and bold transformation. Dalton rallied behind her, embracing the promise of a fresh start. But the triumph was short-lived. What began as a hopeful new chapter quickly unraveled into a deepening storm of scandal, accusations, and betrayal. At first, Henyard's leadership energized Dalton. Her victory felt like a statement, a declaration that the town was ready for change. But slowly, that hopeful narrative began to fracture. Whispers turned into headlines. Reports of unethical behavior and administrative overreach surfaced. Trust in the woman once seen as a political breakthrough began to erode. Central to the growing backlash was a troubling pattern. Henyard repeatedly appointed close allies, many lacking relevant experience, to powerful municipal positions, from village attorney to police chief to top administrative roles. Critical offices were filled without proper vetting, background checks, or board approval. Critics argued it wasn't about competence. It was about control. Henyard, they said, was not building a government to serve the people, but one designed to protect her growing political power. Her repeated refusal to respect legal norms, bypassing board approvals, ignoring protocol, and dismissing concerns, triggered a cascade of legal battles and widened the rift between Henyard and Dalton's governing institutions. As pressure mounted, rather than course-correct, Henyard grew more combative, doubling down on unilateral decisions, disregarding court orders, and tightening her grip on power. Then came the financial questions. Alarming reports emerged suggesting Henyard was misusing public funds, spending taxpayer money on luxury travel, extravagant purchases, and personal indulgences, while Dalton itself struggled to afford basic services like street repairs and public safety. The contrast between her lavish expenditures and the village's crumbling infrastructure ignited public fury. Things took an even darker turn when a key witness, rumored to have once been romantically involved with Henyard, came forward with explosive allegations. The witness claimed Henyard had accepted bribes from local business owners, offering expedited permits and special treatment in return. If true, these accusations pointed not just to personal misconduct, but to systemic corruption, power used not for public good, but for personal gain. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Residents who had once believed in Henyard, who had celebrated her as the town's savior, felt profoundly betrayed. They had placed their trust, their hopes, in her hands, only to be met with the bitter reality that their faith may have been exploited for personal enrichment. As the scandal deepened, Henyard's administration circled the wagons. Her inner circle, staffers and appointees whose qualifications had been questioned from the start, closed ranks, offering little transparency and even less accountability. Their loyalty, it seemed, was not to Dalton, but to Henyard herself. And as public outrage grew, so too did their efforts to shield her from consequences. Despite mounting evidence and escalating outrage, Henyard remained defiant. She dismissed the allegations as politically motivated attacks, meant to undermine her leadership. But as former allies distanced themselves and new revelations raised even more red flags, it became harder for residents to ignore the gravity of the accusations. What once sounded like partisan noise was now an undeniable indictment of her entire administration. The tipping point came when new witnesses stepped forward, adding weight and credibility to the corruption claims. Testimonies painted a disturbing portrait of a leader who wasn't just bending the rules, but actively manipulating the system for personal and political gain. Municipal funds meant for public services were allegedly diverted toward luxury expenses, while essential programs suffered, and just when it seemed the crisis couldn't deepen any further, the FBI stepped in. Federal investigators launched a probe into the handling of state and village funds, focusing on possible violations related to public spending and illegal contract awards. The arrival of federal authorities confirmed what many in Dalton had feared. This was no longer just a local political squabble. It was a full-blown federal investigation, even in the face of such staggering legal peril. Henyard's defiance did not falter. She continued to bypass the board of trustees, flouted court orders, and made unilateral decisions without oversight. Her blatant refusal to follow judicial rulings became a symbol of the broader erosion of democratic norms within Dalton. What had once been heralded as a new era of hope had spiraled into total governance chaos. The community's response was fierce and immediate. Town hall meetings were packed with furious residents demanding accountability, answers, and action. Longtime supporters publicly denounced her. Calls for Henyard's resignation echoed through the streets of Dalton. As frustration and disillusionment reached a fever pitch, the damage, however, extended far beyond the immediate scandal. Financially, Dalton was struggling to stay afloat, crippled by deficits, unpaid contracts, and state funds frozen pending the outcome of investigations. But the deeper wounds were political and emotional. Trust in local government had been shattered. Faith in public institutions, the very systems designed to protect the community, had been fundamentally eroded. The hope that had once surrounded Henyard's election had been replaced by disappointment, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. Even as investigations continue and lawsuits pile up, one truth has already become clear. Tiffany Henyard's story, once an inspiring tale of change and resilience, has become a sobering lesson about the perils of unchecked ambition. The same boldness, confidence, and rebellious spirit that once made her a symbol of progress are now viewed as signs of ego-driven leadership detached from service and accountability in the end. The scandal engulfing Henyard's administration is bigger than just one leader's fall from grace. It is a harsh reminder of why transparency, accountability, and humility must be at the core of public service. Dalton, once jubilant at its historic breakthrough, now faces the painful task of rebuilding from political collapse, from financial disaster, and from the deep emotional wounds left behind. Tiffany Henyard's meteoric rise and stunning downfall will be remembered not just as a political cautionary tale, but as a searing testament to what can happen when the promise of leadership gives way to the corruption of power. Tiffany Henyard's rise and fall, a village betrayed, a community left to rebuild. Real leadership isn't about breaking barriers or holding titles. It's about serving with integrity. Without that foundation, even the most promising political journeys can end in scandal, betrayal, and collapse. In Dalton, Illinois, the story of Tiffany Henyard stands as a stark reminder of this truth. Once celebrated as a trailblazer, Henyard made history by becoming the village's first woman and first black mayor, a young, dynamic figure who promised to usher in an era of transformation. Her election wasn't just symbolic. It was a victory for representation, hope, and the belief that Dalton's future could finally break free from a stagnant past. But that promise was soon shattered. Henyard's administration quickly descended into controversy, setting off a political firestorm that would consume Dalton and leave the village reeling from the start. Concerns mounted over how Henyard governed. She filled critical village roles, attorney, police chief, senior administrators, not based on merit, but on loyalty. Many of these appointments, critics noted, were made without proper vetting, board approval, or public transparency. It wasn't simply bad governance. It was, according to many, a strategic consolidation of power for personal and political gain. Transparency and accountability were among the first casualties. Legal norms were brushed aside. The rift between Henyard's office and Dalton's other officials widened, igniting what would soon become a prolonged and ugly leadership crisis. The allegations piled up quickly. Reports surfaced of misuse of municipal funds, extravagant taxpayer-funded travel, and public dollars spent on personal luxuries. Claims of bribery and favoritism grew louder, with local businesses allegedly receiving expedited permits and public contracts in exchange for kickbacks. Meanwhile, Dalton's essential services, schools, public health, and infrastructure were left severely underfunded, and neglect of the scandal took an even more explosive turn when a key witness, reportedly Henyard's former boyfriend, came forward with damning testimony. His statements painted a devastating picture of a mayor who, rather than serving her community, used her office to enrich herself and her inner circle, all while Dalton's residents bore the burden. Instead of addressing the crisis directly, Henyard's behavior only worsened the situation. During a tense court appearance, she became visibly emotional, a public outburst that many saw not as vulnerability, but as a leader cracking under the immense pressure of mounting accusations. The backlash online was swift and brutal. Social media erupted with hashtags calling for her resignation, and public trust, already eroding, collapsed even further at a critical village board meeting. Henyard showed up late, clutching prepared remarks. As she spoke, she was met with boos, eye rolls, and growing hostility. She pressed forward with her agenda, ignoring the storm of accusations around her. Her refusal to even acknowledge the controversy only deepened the disconnect between her administration and the people she had sworn to serve. The fallout was massive. Dalton, once brimming with hope, was now drowning in political and financial chaos. Residents demanded answers. Where had their tax dollars gone? Why were public services collapsing while the mayor allegedly lived lavishly? As revelations mounted, new reports indicated that Henyard's administration had violated state transparency laws. Meanwhile, federal investigators, who had reportedly been tracking Henyard's financial activities for nearly a year, began closing in. Their probe uncovered questionable transactions, suspected embezzlement, and potential misuse of public funds. Several members of Henyard's inner circle also fell under scrutiny, suggesting that the alleged corruption extended far beyond one individual. The pressure became unbearable. Henyard's once loyal base largely abandoned her. Community leaders who had once championed her historic rise were now publicly calling for her resignation. One trustee declared that Dalton desperately needed real leadership to move forward, describing Henyard's administration as a case study in broken promises and shattered trust. What began as whispers of mismanagement has spiraled into a full-blown federal investigation, one with the power to dismantle not just Henyard's career, but the very legitimacy of Dalton's political system. The damage wasn't just political or financial. It was existential. Confidence in local governance was obliterated. Residents wondered if the system could ever truly recover. Henyard's actions hadn't just tarnished her own reputation. They had corroded the very foundations of public trust. Despite a flood of evidence, Henyard remained defiantly silent, refusing to engage meaningfully with the public. Her denials, paired with her refusal to offer any real transparency, only fueled the growing anger. Every public appearance became a flashpoint. At one particularly explosive village board meeting, Henyard arrived late and delivered a tone-deaf, defiant speech that only served to deepen public frustration. Her words were met with disapproval, and her emotional appeals fell flat. To many, it was proof that she had lost touch with the community she had once inspired. As the federal investigation intensified, more disturbing allegations surfaced. Misappropriated funds, secretive deals, political favoritism. Legal analysts warned that criminal charges were no longer just a possibility. They were becoming a likelihood. In a last-ditch effort to rally her dwindling supporters, Henyard took to social media, posting a cryptic message quoting scripture. Asterisk, if God is for us, who can be against us? Asterisk, but instead of rallying sympathy, the post sparked widespread mockery. Critics called it tone-deaf, a desperate, hollow gesture from a leader accused of profound betrayal. Public pressure continued to mount. Local officials demanded immediate action. Residents organized rallies and town halls. Anger, frustration, and a fierce demand for change gripped the village. Federal investigators expanded their probe, focusing on financial misdeeds and placing Henyard's closest allies under intense scrutiny. What had started as local rumors had morphed into a national scandal, a political reckoning with no clear end in sight. Dalton, once filled with pride at Henyard's election, now faced a painful reality. The village wasn't just dealing with the downfall of a leader. It was confronting the collapse of its faith in the very idea of transformative leadership. Could a political system so deeply shaken by scandal ever be rebuilt? Could trust, once broken so completely, ever be restored? The fallout exposed systemic flaws, gaps in oversight, weak transparency measures, and a troubling culture of complacency. But more than anything, it left deep emotional scars. Dalton's sense of pride and unity had been shattered. A community that once celebrated a groundbreaking victory was now left divided, disillusioned, and wounded as the investigation reaches its climax. Dalton remains in limbo. Will Henyard step down? Will she be forced out through legal action? The outcome remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the road to recovery will be long and difficult. Dalton's residents now face a monumental task: rebuilding their village's political structure from the ground up, restoring transparency, re-establishing accountability, rekindling trust in leadership. Tiffany Henyard's meteoric rise and stunning fall serve as a powerful reminder. Public office isn't about personal ambition, image, or making history. It's about service. It's about integrity. And without those core principles, even the most celebrated political legacies can crumble into cautionary tales. Her downfall is more than just a scandal. It's a warning. When power goes unchecked, it's the people who pay the price. When ambition eclipses service, communities suffer. Dalton's future now depends on whether it can heal from this betrayal, rebuild what was broken, and forge a new generation of leaders who understand what true leadership demands. The work ahead will be grueling. But if Dalton can rise again, it will be because its people demand better, and because they refuse to let the promise of transformation die in the wreckage of corruption.